All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Clinical Marketer Podcast. Today we got a really special episode. We got Mike Kohm in here who took a practice. Well, before he even started his practice, he was a clinic director. And when he just wasn't getting the fulfillment he was looking for out of that, he started his own practice. And within a year, he went from basically nothing, transitioned into full-time, and then grew into a six-figure practice all by himself, managing all the sales and all that growth basically by himself. And now, after he's had so much success, now he's starting to help other PTs and other rehab professionals learn how to launch their own hybrid practices where they're accepting both insurance and cash. So today, we're digging into his story and sharing how exactly he had so much success launching this all on his own. Mike, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jordan. Glad to be here. Let's get started.
Yeah. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your story? Let's start when you were a clinic director, and the first time you realized that I really need to step out on your own and start your own practice.
Well, that was with some encouragement of my wife, and the place I was working was it was a tough place to be for me personally. So it was I had several of my friends who had been encouraging me for a long time, PT colleagues, to jump out into my own. And one buddy was super generous with freeing up space. He had a Monday through Thursday practice. He's like, man, you can work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever you want to do. And so I started with doing on-call work and then seeing my own clients on Friday and Saturday. And I would also see people at my house now that we're getting into the story. So I would see sometimes people at my house, like on a Monday or Tuesday. I'm sitting in the room. It's our online yoga studio too. So that's how it started. And then
hold on. Sorry, Siri jumped in and interrupted you. So you're seeing patients at your house and basically using that as an online yoga studio as well. What else was going on?
So I was seeing clients 2 days a week in a proper clinic, and then seeing, people in my house. I do a lot of manual therapy, so a lot of hands-on, and I do movement screens. So my practice isn't a lot of equipment specific. Give people a lot of body weight work, out of the movement screen, some kettlebell work, if they're open to that. And then also, do dry needling and manual therapy. So that's what people basically were coming to me for in the beginning. And then, continue to take continuing education, and lately have delved into pain science, and have hosted Gregory Lehman a few times here in Colorado. So I've been his sort of liaison and sponsor, and he comes down and teaches a course. I help him set it up. And that's also been a great avenue for my practice, because especially in light of COVID, like there's so much anxiety out there, and I believe that anxiety drives pain. So if you can get people you can objectively talk about pain without saying, oh, it's all in your head. So that's been another nice adjunct to my practice. But started part-time, 2.5 days a week. And on the other side was doing on-call work, and then just kept backing it up to where I could get to the point where I could go full-time and not do PRN work anymore. So that happened about 3 years ago. And in the beginning, I swear, it's like if you ever hire an employee when you're really busy, then all of a sudden you hit a slow patch. So I moved out on my own, so to speak, and I had more days of the week. So I had a lot of time on my hands because they weren't all crammed into 2 full-time days. And so I marketed like crazy, and business to business, business to client, that type of thing. Used some automation that was pretty simplistic, but robust. So I use Square as a point of service, and they have a really good marketing system where you can, and that really helped me grow my cash practice. That was one of the things.
Okay. And I'm going to dig into that in a little bit, but before we go too deep into that, what's some advice? Cause I know your story there's just countless people listening to this that can relate to it so heavily, that just don't like the job that they're in, don't love it, and aren't getting that sense of fulfillment. So what kind of advice did your wife or your friends give you, or that you can give our listeners that are kind of on the fence and stuck in this job that they don't like?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So you can delve into it pretty simplistically. Like I said, depending on what your niche is, you probably don't need a lot of equipment. You could start with 1 or 2 days a week in either in an office space sharing situation. With a hybrid practice, it's a combination of cash and insurances. So we're in a somewhat unique position in Colorado where we have capitation. So I take a lot of out of network benefits. So what I would say, if you're going to do that, one of the things to think about is how much time do you have, and to think about, if you are going to accept insurance, consider getting a good billing company that can show you the average reimbursement for CPT codes, so you're not caught taking some of what I would call the bottom feeder insurance reimbursement. That way, your time is valuable. Because part of the challenge, if you take some of the lower insurance reimbursement and nobody else in town is, your practice gets flooded with that. And then if you're good at what you do, you're gonna become fairly busy fairly quickly, and then you're gonna be wearing a lot of hats. And then what happens is you don't have time you're putting out fires. So I think a billing company in the beginning can afford somebody a lot of resources. My billing company in particular has a software program where I can go in and check benefits. So when I get that phone call and I'm screening a client, do you take my insurance? And that's something we can talk about too. I can check their benefits and send them a PDF. So, and break all that down and explain it to them. And quite often, even very educated people don't understand if they have a $3,000 or $5,000 deductible. They're paying cash up to that point. So either you could use your out-of-network benefit, or you could pay cash, and you have to make it clear that you're not going to be able to back up and 8 months from now delve back into insurance billing. But I've never had that problem. So,
what software do you use where you're able to check what the
it's part of what's called NextGen. It's the software billing. It's the software that my billing practice has me run my billing through.
Okay. Yeah, no, just curious. I'm sure someone listening was like, "Oh, I wonder what tool he's using." So thanks for sharing that. So before we go into kind of the PRN work and what you did to actually get started, were you afraid to step away from your job and start your own thing? And like, what kind of things were you telling yourself at the time that helped you kind of get over that stuff?
Oh, I was terrified, man.
I bet.
I had a young daughter, and my wife was like, it's either time to put up or shut up, basically, And so I was about to go into a meeting, one of my last meetings where I was working, and 10 minutes before I got a phone call, because I started putting feelers out about doing on-call work. And a buddy called me, and he always takes about 3 weeks off every summer. And he's like, "Hey, I got 3 weeks of work for you. What do you think? How many days can you give me?" And I'm about to go in this meeting deciding if I'm going to stay at this clinic or not. And I'm like, "Pretty sure I'll be able to take that. Can I give you a call back later tonight?" And so that was late May. And I launched, and then I had an actually really good start. And then the holidays hit where I live, and it seemed like everybody went out of town. So then it was a bit of a scramble. So it was that classic small business launch where you rocket out of the gates and then you slide way back, and then you have to build back. And that was kind of the dance for quite a while, for a year to 2 years. Now, well, COVID has kind of turned things on its head, but things were very steady before COVID.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about, your experience. That slide that slide back down is, as soon as it's over, it's going to go back up and you're going to be back to probably doing even better than you were before once all this craziness is over.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
But once you actually stepped out, made the decision, had the courage to go out there and start your own thing, you started doing some PRN work. So how did you balance that between, serving other people's clients and finding your own? And then how did you go about finding your own clients?
So I set aside in the beginning just 2 clinic days a week. I was subletting from a buddy, and I would do Friday and Saturday, and then I would try to line up PRN work a week or two ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So let's say I was doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Then on Wednesdays, I would open up to see people at my house. So my clients were very patient with me in the beginning. So, and then I just kept walking it back. And I also, even in the very beginning, I even went to people's houses. I even had a bit of a concierge type setup. That didn't last a super long time, but one thing that really I think helped lend to the success was being open on Saturdays. That was a very good time frame for availability for clients, because a lot of other clinics are not open on Saturdays, and I would get both acute patients who had just hurt their neck or their low back, and then I would also get my regular clientele. So to further go into the question, to answer that with respect to the whole balance of it in marketing. So I did some automation with Square and also email capturing, and had a very basic CRM, and then did a lot of follow-up with clients as well. And then, like I said at the very beginning, kept marketing business to business and business to client. So that's where, and in the beginning, it was word of mouth. I would treat one family member, and then 2, and then a partner or a kid. And when I look in my file drawer, there'll be out of the Smith family, there'll be 3 or 4 of them, or a sister or a brother. So, I just tried to be very present with whoever I was working with and give them 100% of my attention and time. And I ideally give them a lot of value for their money, whether they were a cash and or an insurance client.
That's awesome. Yeah, folks, we tell people that all the time. The first thing they have to do before you ever get into any sort of paid advertising is build those real relationships. You can't shortcut or bypass those things. So you started with the lowest hanging fruit, it sounds. So you went after your friends and family first for those first clients?
No, not necessarily. I had a following, because I've been in practice for quite a while. So I had some clients who followed me who had previously known me from other practices and who liked my style. So I like to think I was pretty authentic about it. I did not take any information out of any clinic I worked on. I just told people I won't be working here, at this clinic anymore. And of course people would say, well, what are you doing? And I would say, I'm finally going to go open my own practice. And so those people organically found me through I built a website and had an online scheduler. And so that was another thing that really helped get another thing off my plate. Was in the beginning, I was doing a lot of phone tag with clients. Can you come in at this time? No, I can't. Can you come in at this time? No, I can't. So I got an online scheduler, and people love that. They don't have to call me. They get a text message reminder. They can reschedule if they want through it. It's fantastic.
Right. No, that sounds it's so freaking key, and some people don't even have that. And when you first when you left the practice and you did communicate with your past patients, how did you did you have any sort of non-compete in place? Did you have to navigate anything like that? Or like, how did you reach out to your past patients to let them know? Did you have a conversation with the practice beforehand or anything like that?
That was often, like I was just sharing a little bit ago, that was more like, oh, well, hey, can I come see you in 2 weeks? I'm like, I'm not going to be here in 2 weeks. Well, where are you going? And well, I'm opening my own thing. And then people would say, can I find you? And I would say to them, I'm not going to recruit you. That's entirely up to you. And so it was I tried to honor the place I was working at, even though I was leaving. And I had a computer that the practice had given me, and I had to wipe that clean and turn it back in, and that was all good.
Mm-hmm.
But I had been in practice for quite a few years, so people had known me from being in the county that I'm in, and I had brought some of my own clients from practice to practice, so they organically followed me, and I felt like I had enough of a base to launch off of.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. The only reason I ask, I know some people are probably like, well, how do I get my patients to come over there? And the answer is you just built such a good relationship with them that by the time they needed some help, they actually reached out to you personally rather than going through the practice. Okay.
Yeah, my
for
experience is people will find you. If they really like what you are specifically doing for them, they will organically find you. Another thing I did is I got the local newspaper did a little, like, they called it a new practice spotlight or something, a new business spotlight. And I got interviewed by that. I was in a little article for that, and quite a few people saw the article. So that was pretty beneficial. So that was another thing that came to fruition.
Is that something you knew about beforehand, or is that something that you discovered, then you sought someone out and made that happen? How did that whole thing unravel?
The latter. I think I was just reading the newspaper and I saw the new business spotlight in the Daily Camera. And so I contacted, it had an email contact at the bottom of the article. So I emailed them and said, hey, I'm a new business. What do I need to send you? And they're like, a picture and a little description, and we'll throw it out there for you.
Yeah, that's some sage advice right there, because I'm sure every city or every county has something close to that.
Oh, yeah.
So I love that. I love that. So if you're listening to this, go check and see if your county has something like that, so that you can get some free publicity pushed out to your entire community. That's awesome. I love it.
The other thing I did is I also built a business plan. I went to the local SBDC and they had free help. And so through that help, I met with a gal who was really generous with her time. I ended up taking a course from her about marketing, and that was quite a while ago. But I think that even though the business plan, just writing it down and creating the container for the business, even though I probably haven't looked at it in years, it'd be fun to go back and check it out and see how many of the boxes I could tick off. But I think that gave it a bit of a structure and a foundation before I launched. So, because there's some phenomenal statistic that businesses that don't create a business plan fail. So, and it doesn't have to be a 20-page outline, but I think it's good to write down what your structure is going to be.
Right. And where you're trying to go and what you're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, how can you possibly have a strategy in place that's going to get you there if you don't even know where you're going?
Yeah, your local SBDC can be a great resource. You can pop in at a lunchtime presentation, or they have a lot of good free marketing advice as well. I mean, there's so much online, but the SBDC for me years ago was also a big help.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. For those who don't know, SBDC stands for Small Business Development Center. Fun fact, I was actually the marketing and IT intern for the SBDC here for a couple of years before I went out and started my own business. So that's how a lot of this got started. So I'm glad that you're taking advantage of that. So The SBDC, every single city has one of those. I've never been in a city that doesn't have them. Very often they're on college campuses. So definitely seek yours out because they have an insane amount of free resources. I believe they're government funded. So they have resources that they can either give to businesses as grants. They have workshops. They got all sorts of marketing advice, and like Mike said, can help you with your business plan. So thanks for sharing that. That's SBDC is one of those super underutilized free resources that businesses just don't know about. Okay. So a little bit of a rabbit hole there. Let's get back on track. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was you said that you were doing email collection. Did you have a strategy around doing that? Did you do like ebooks or what was your strategy?
No, and that was one of my downfalls. Actually, I would just literally capture emails and put them into a Google group, into an email group, and then I would email out of that group like, hey, I'm going to be open on this Saturday. And I also use Facebook a lot, so I would let people know. Like that was the other thing I did a lot. So earlier you said you did mention like the low hanging fruit. So I guess that is a valid point. I did treat a lot of my friends. My family lives in another state, but so that's another way I just reached out to people is I would just announce my schedule on like Sunday night. Okay, here's the following schedule for my physical therapy practice. So even though that was fairly informal, that did bring in a fair number of clients a week.
Nice.
And then eventually I segued off of working on Saturdays, but occasionally I still go in on a Saturday.
Yeah, getting started. Sometimes you just gotta do what everyone else just refuses to do until you get to the point where you don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, I work in sort of I rent in what I would call like a wellness collective. And there's a few massage therapists and they work Saturdays and Sundays. So, and then they take weekdays off.
Oh, that works out. I'm sure they're good referral sources for you as well, at being in the same building. So what would you, before we kind of transition into your tactics with sales and how you're able to grow so quickly and actually, convert so many people into patients, what was, out of all the years that you've been doing this, what has been the one primary driver for new patients into your business?
Wow, that's an awesome question. I would say looking at sort of Jerry Durham's work, the complete patient cycle. So because I started as myself, so I am the front desk person. I am the billing person. So when I saw Jerry speak at SSPT, that really resonated with me. And that goes back to using for people who want to use their out-of-network or in-network benefits, I can go and check on that for them. And that can be part of that initial discovery call. So I think I after watching Jerry, I think I went from probably a 35-40% conversion up to 75 to 80%. And the other thing I did was, so somebody at the end of that conversation said, look, I really appreciate your time, but right now financially, I just can't afford out of network. I have to stay in network. Where should I go? So I have, like I said, I've been in the county for a while, so I would refer people to a high quality clinic that I know. And so we all don't take the same insurances, so they would refer back to me. I know that's a bit of a segue, but so that was a good business connection. So that was part of the way I grew as well. And that also kind of grew out of PRN because when I was doing PRN work, I met all the clinic owners. So I eventually said to them, I'm not available for PRN work, but here's what I'm doing. And like I said, I might not be we might have different insurance networks. So let's help each other out. And people were really open to that.
Yeah.
But going back to the driver of that initial discovery call was the way I really grew my practice. Was somebody would call up who got referred by a friend or one of their family members, and the insurance question would come up, and I stopped answering that. I would ask people, what are your goals for physical therapy? And I would try to get them to tell their story. Um, I, I like listening to Terry Gross on NPR because I think she's one of the best interviewers I've ever heard. So finally, somebody interviewed her, and she said one of the great ways to capture a good interview is get a person to tell their story. So I would ask them their story with, what brought you to this phone call? What are the issues that you're dealing with? And try, what a lot of people say is, like Greg Todd, provide a solution for their problem. And because I've been in the game for a while, I'd like to think I could answer a lot of questions, and that would almost turn into somebody subjective. And at the end, I would say, let me get back to your insurance question. And then when I would follow up with their insurance question and say, look, you have a $3,000 out of network deductible. You're paying cash either way. And I like to pride myself on, if you're not seeing progress in 2 to 3 to 4 visits, we're going to either back up and switch the plan of care, or we're going to use a referral source and get some other eyes on board, whether that's a physiatrist or, that's who I usually refer out to as a physiatry group or a regenerative orthopedic group that does things like PRP and prolotherapy. So I'd like to think that people came to realize, and I would tell people that in the initial phone call, I'm not the type of guy who's going to treat you 10 times and say, sorry, it didn't work, and burn all your money. So it's not on a script per se, because each individual has their own story, but I really try to get each client to tell me their story and try to move that forward, so to speak. And so I see people a lot of times for second and third physical therapy opinions. And a buddy of mine, the guy I rented from, he's a phenomenal physical therapist. And he told me a long time ago, the experts don't gloss over the simple stuff. Start with looking, for some of the obvious things. And then if it's esoteric, that's when you get help on board.
Yeah. You had a lot of really, really good points in there. That's I don't even know if you noticed exactly how awesome it is what you do. Like when you weren't able to treat someone's insurance and they just weren't going to pay cash, and that you would just refer them to other businesses that many people would consider competitors. I think that is such a important thing that a lot of people are afraid to do because they have such a limiting kind of mindset over sending patients to a potential competitor. But because you did that, it sounds like it was returned to you maybe 2 times, 3 times over, because they in turn referred people over to you. That's amazing, and a lot of people struggle with doing things like that. Secondly, I really like that you make people feel super comfortable during the initial sale. When do you actually tell them that you're not the guy that's going to see them 10 times and say, sorry, it didn't work? Like if it's not working, we're going to either adapt the plan or we're going to refer you to someone else. Is that part of the sales conversation?
It can be. Yeah, definitely with the right person. If they're a little hesitant, they're like, well, I tried, and I tried that, and I'll try to get them to talk about, well, what was your experience like in physical therapy? What did you actually do? And I'll listen to their story. And the one thing I'm trying to be very careful about is I never demean the other practitioner. I say something to the effect of, well, I can appreciate why they maybe came at your problem that way, but this is the way I would look at it. Or especially if you get somebody who's had, I do manual therapy, but when you get somebody who's had a lot of manual therapy and they're not getting better, the missing link is probably strength, So I dovetail that with movement screens and try to get people to realize, you got to put a little skin in the game. You got to, doing your homework is going to help you get better. Um,
Always. Okay, so we kind of have a good idea of how you got to where you are, what's your kind of, not really your treatment strategy, but like how you handle and deal with people and what the main driver was in your business. But I want to dig into more of like what you learned from Jerry Durham that allowed you to jump from that like 30, you said like 30, 40 conversion rate up to like 80. What changed in your process?
Oh, the big change was listening. I think that was listening and asking the right questions and being patient in the phone call, not trying to interrupt and really let them, not asking yes or no questions, so trying to ask questions that would really lead to the root of the problem. And then also ask them, if you had any diagnostic imaging, how long has it been going on? So in essence, get them to tell their story and be an active listener. That's what really changed. I think prior to seeing Jerry speak at SSPT and then also watching, following him in his lives and doing some webinars that he's been involved with, that I think the big thing was I would, in summary, say being a better active listener and being a better interviewer.
So are there any specific questions that you started asking your patients that kind of led to this, that got them to open up more and share more of their story? Do you have any like questions that you make sure you ask every single time that you jump on a sales call?
Yeah, the number one question is, what do you want to get back to? What can't you do right now? And what do you want to get back to? What is your goal with your visit? What are your goals over the next 3 to 5 to 6 visits to help you get back to doing what you want to do? Because my goal for them might not be their goal. Not
That
everybody.
Rarely is.
Right.
So once I answer that question, I know like people very rarely will tell you like everything. Do you have subsequent questions that you use to kind of drill into the real root of the problem? Like, what if would you feel comfortable like doing an example, like using me and pretending that I'm just someone calling you? Because I actually have a problem with my hip, and we could do almost like a mock interview.
Sure, let's go.
Yeah, I'm making this up on the spot, so
yeah, man.
They're better or worse.
Here we go.
All right. Hey, Mike, I'm calling today because I have this issue with my hip, and it's been bugging me for months, and it's gotten to the point where I lost hope in it just going away on its own. I was hoping that you might be able to help me out.
All right. So Jordan, when did it start, and do you have a point in time where you can pick out that your hip problem began?
Yeah, vividly. It was so bad. It actually, one morning I just woke up in bed and I like couldn't lift my left leg. And it was just so tight and sore. It felt like I fell off of something high, like right onto my hip. And then like laying on the ground, lifting my leg hurt. And I just try to do that every now and then because I felt like, oh, it hurts when I do this. I should just keep doing it and strengthen it and stretch it out a little bit. But it's been at least a few days out of the week. It's a burden.
Guys, can I ask you a couple questions? Do you have any associated low back pain, or did you have any low back pain when your hip first began to bother you?
Not right away, but I have noticed that since I've been dealing with this for a while, that I do have like a shooting pain that kind of extends a little bit up into my lower back, but mostly like shoots down my leg.
How far down your leg does it go?
Sometimes it's like right in the same area where I'd get shin splints.
Okay. Do you notice if you bend back or bend forward, does that make your hip or your back feel better or worse?
It feels better when I do some like standing squats. That's usually what I do when it's really irritated. I'll do some standing squats and that'll help.
Okay. So have you had any other treatment or diagnostic imaging?
No, I'm too
I,
stubborn until
I'm
now.
your first guy. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What's the nature of the pain down the leg? Does it tingle? Does it burn? Is it go numb? Is it electrical?
I would say it feels like maybe more of a burning sensation.
Okay.
Like it doesn't it's like the word I wanted to use is tight, but that's not really it. So yeah,
Okay.
I'd say burning maybe.
Do you have pain, constant pain, or does it come and go?
Comes and goes.
Okay.
Usually when
And
I wake up in the morning, and maybe like halfway through the day.
one thing, I guess you mentioned that it came up, you woke up with it. How old is the bed that you're sleeping on?
Ooh, during the time that this happened, that was the same bed I was sleeping on when I was like 7.
Okay. Okay, so have you noticed if you sleep in a different bed, or can you sleep in a different bed if it gets better or worse?
Yeah, since I've been dealing with this problem for like 2+ years now. Um, when it first started happening, it was so bad that I just slept on the floor, and that helped.
Okay. Um, so that's something we could delve into. You know, when you come in, we could look at um, talking about different bed types and what. There's a really good blog called
Mm.
theoldbedguy.com, and he's a little verbose. It's like somebody said to him, "Hey, Grandpa, you should write a blog. You know so much about beds." But there's a lot of really good information on that, on how a proper
Mm.
bed should fit. I can't say that's the end all be all because I would need to see you in person. Uh, but one of the things, what are some of your goals? What do you want to get back to? Like if your hip wasn't
Really,
bothering you.
I think I would run. I used to run a lot, and now
Okay.
it's kind of this like fear almost in the back of my head sometimes. And I used to squat a lot heavier when I'd work out, and now it's one of those things where it's like it. And this is probably a crazy thing to think, but sometimes it feels like it's just gonna like pop out of its socket. So I'm afraid to like squat heavy and do any like hard lifts like that.
Okay. So it sounds like what else do you like to do for activities besides lifting and running?
I like to go on a lot of walks. Spend a lot of time. Sometimes I'll go out on the golf range, or even though I'm terrible, with my buddies, and that's actually even though I'm not a crazy golfer, like I don't care that I'm terrible, but it definitely prevents me from doing like a full drive because I have to like turn into my hip, and that feels like it pops sometimes.
Okay.
So that's definitely interferes with some stuff I do with my friends.
Okay. So that's a lot of really good information. What I would recommend, if you make an appointment or when you come in for an appointment is I think we should start with a movement screen. And because you're an active guy and we can do a baseline movement screen and take a look
Hmm.
at things like how are you squatting? Are you offloading off that hip? Do some single leg squats. Just sometimes the problem can be related directly to the hip, but sometimes it can be a really tight shoulder on one side because your
Okay.
shoulder directly connects to your hip through your lat, through your latissimus dorsi. So I'd want to do a comprehensive movement screen and see if we can find some um, differences, right to left, and also see if we can find some weakness or tightness out of that. And then
Hmm.
out of that movement screen, we'll develop an exercise program specific for you. It won't be a cookie cutter home program. It'll be based out of that movement screen. And I can send you a home video program out of a software I use called MedBridge. So that's how I would start it out. And then we could talk about some manual therapy options in terms of if dry needling would be appropriate, if some joint or soft tissue mobilization would be appropriate. And that's how I would start you out.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm in. Let's book it. I fly down to Colorado tomorrow.
There you go.
No, that was so good. That was actually felt like I didn't intend to actually share like my entire story. That's like all that's so real. I didn't make that stuff up. But you definitely, I could tell that you were genuinely interested and wanted to get to the root cause. And I really like that you asked if you can ask me some questions. Like that's a sales tactic. It's micro commitments where you get someone to say yes and get them used to saying yes so they can say yes to the sale. And that you give them some value before you even ask anything from them. You say that you're going to send me a blog that'll help me figure it out on my own. And then you also, say like you come in, you're going to give me, various treatment options, but you're going to send me home with a video program, right? That some light bulbs went off for me right there.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many clients I've had. One of the frequent questions I get is, are you going to actually treat me the first time I come in? And I'm like, yeah. And I'll say back to them, well, that's the beauty of this phone call. You've already told me your story, so you don't have to tell me your story again. I wrote it down during, I'm taking notes. So I write it down and I'll bring that with me when I write up their evaluation. And I already know their subjective. So when they come in, I might ask them a couple more questions, or how the last week has been, or, is their hip better or worse? And then I can get to some treatments straight away, and they go home with more tools in their toolbox. That's how and I like to pride myself on helping them help themselves get better. So, if someone's paying you cash, I find they're generally more committed to doing their home program because they want to get back to golf. They want to get back to running and squatting.
Nice. Then what other, I thought it's a really interesting question that they asked if, you're going to treat them the first time. That's actually some insight that I haven't heard some of before. What are some other like big questions that you get?
Have you ever treated this before?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's a pretty, and then, the Dr. Google always plays into the conversation. Not always, but a lot of people are, especially right now, they've got a lot of time on their hands, and they'll say, well, I have sciatica. And I'll say back to them, well, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but sciatica can be caused literally by 6 or 8 different things. And my job is to source out, what is the beginning of that pain?
Right.
Is it your lumbar spine? Is it your hip? Is it a type piriformis? Is it a weak hip causing a type piriformis? So we'll have a conversation on that too. And usually there's some humor involved with that. People know that they've checked out Dr. Google, and it obviously hasn't solved their problem. Otherwise they wouldn't be calling you.
Right. So then, last question, because we're just about out of time.
Sure.
How the biggest question that we get that I am not equipped to help answer people is like, how do you handle do you take my insurance question? You mentioned briefly that you kind of push that towards the end of the conversation and just focus more on like, okay, well, before we get to that, how do you handle that question?
So the first thing is I might ask them, well, who's your insurer? And quite often they're calling you because they've called 2 or 3 other clinics that don't take their insurance. Mm-hmm. But no one has really sat down and taken the time to explain how their insurance works. They just say, no, we don't take X insurance. And then that's the end of the conversation with the previous clinic. So I'll say to somebody, almost everybody has a smartphone. So I'll say to them, shoot me a picture of the front and the back of your card. Email me that, text me that, read it to me on the phone if they're worried about security. And out of my software program that I alluded to, I can go in and check in and out of network benefits. Sometimes if I have time, I can do it right there on the spot with them. I can do it live and say to them, oh, it looks like, you have an HSA eligible plan, and a lot of the top down employers will contribute. There's programs where employers can contribute to HSAs, and so I'll say to them, did you realize that part of your HSA plan is a physical therapy eligible expense? And they're like, oh, okay. Or we'll go back to, you have a really high deductible both in and out of network, and you're paying cash for this issue, and it's May of 2020 and you haven't met any of your deductible. And from what you're describing, I don't think this is going to be a 15 visit type of problem. I think we can get this resolved in 6 to 8 visits over the course of a couple of 3 months. And so I try to give them all their options. I try to explain to them, what the network benefit will be like, what the out of network benefit will be like, and what the cash option is.
I love that. So given the choice, you'd always take insurance over cash. It sounds like you kind of, if their insurance isn't great, you kind of downsell them into the cash pay. Is that right?
Yeah. Some of the actual, it's unique to each insurer, because sometimes the out of network benefits pay at such a better rate than the in network benefits. So in Colorado, we have capitation. So it's a fee for service. So some of the insurers, like literally one of them pays $54 a visit. One pays even less than that. But their out of network benefits are more traditional, where they pay 70 to 30 of, reasonable charges, is how the insurers put it. So because in a hybrid practice, I actually am not in very many of the insurance networks in Colorado because of capitation, but because we have a pretty good tech industry here, people's out of network benefits can be quite good. And the other thing I take that it's unique to each state, but I also take Medicaid. And that was one of the ways I created some financial stability when I launched all this, is because Medicaid in Colorado pays on par with Medicare, and sometimes even better, because there's no multiplier reduction with Medicaid. So I'm still getting a fairly decent reimbursement, actually much better than some traditional insurances with capitation.
That's some really good advice. That's something that everyone should definitely think about when they're deciding which insurances they want to apply for and take. Thanks for sharing that. Lastly, so what were we going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that goes back to the very beginning of what we were talking about, Jordan, with a billing company. Like a really good billing company should, and that can be a little daunting because people will see the 6 to 8% they take, but I think it's money well spent, because you get things like the software program to check benefits. You can figure out through the fee schedule, okay, I want to take this insurance, but this insurance I'm going to take out of network. They'll show you, a good billing company should show you a cost comparison of what the CPT codes are reimbursed at for each respective insurance company.
Good to know. So I know I said that was the last question, but I got to ask you one more now.
Sure.
Is there a sales question that I should have asked you that you wanted to say, that you wanted to help people with?
Man, that's a great question.
It's a curveball.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a bit of a segue of the do you take my insurance? Because ultimately, I think when people come to you, what's driving that phone call? So I guess that would be the question. What made you originally contact me? How did you find me? Oh, my cousin told me, my sister told me, like, you're really good at what you do, and I should call you. So that would be one thing, because that can be, if someone referred them already to you, you have some confidence that's already built into the conversation, and they're just looking to justify that confidence. You know, they're like Paul Gal talks about it all the time. Nobody gets up in the morning and goes to the car dealer and buys a car. I've never known anybody to do that. You know, everybody sits at home and researches it, or at least ask like their neighbor, hey, do you like your Toyota? So I guess that would be the one question, is that, you know, you have that confidence built in if when you ask, how did you find me? How did you find my practice? And sometimes it is an organic internet search or a Facebook ad or that type of thing. But also there's even some confidence built into that, because that person picked up the phone to call you. That person saw something that was enticing enough to want to make that contact. And so I feel like, you know, they've already got 1.5 feet in the door. They're just looking for a little bit more before they commit. They're looking for that education. Like, that's one thing that I like. And instead of using the term sales, sometimes I like the word education.
Nice. I like that too.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming and sharing all your knowledge with us. You got so much. I mean, I feel like I can talk to you the entire afternoon and still pull some gold nuggets out of you. For those of listening that want to find where they can learn more about, sales training or how to launch a hybrid practice, where can they go to find you?
Facebook, the PT Hybrid Group.
PT Hybrid Group. So we'll link that in the beneath this video. So if you're watching this, you can go find his group there. And is that the best way to contact you?
Yeah, or through I have a website called ptbizconsulting.com. So it's PT and then BIZ consulting.com. So that's a great way, and you can see some of the different things that we can talk about for your practice.
Excellent. Well, sounds good. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Jordan.